You're alive? Your lies just buried themselves.
Baggage claim carousel number 4 wasn't where the nightmare started, but John F. Kennedy International Airport is where my decade-long marriage completely shattered. Holding a cheap burner phone I found shoved beneath the passenger seat of our SUV, one glowing text message stared back, instantly unraveling my entire existence. Tuesday mornings were always a masterclass in orchestrated chaos, a routine Akira and I had perfected over 10 years of marriage. The smell of freshly ground espresso beans mixed with his signature Tom Ford cologne, creating a sensory blanket of domestic security that I had long taken for granted. Akira was a senior partner at a high-profile commercial real estate firm in Manhattan, a job that demanded he travel to the Midwest at least 2 weeks out of every month. I was accustomed to the packing, the dry cleaning bags draped over the bedroom armchair, the hushed phone calls with clients before the sun even came up over our Brooklyn brownstone. "Did you pack the navy ties? Or just the gray?" Akira called out from the walk-in closet, his voice muffled by the hanging garments. "Both," I replied automatically, sipping my coffee at the kitchen island. "You know the Chicago board likes the navy, but you always spill coffee on it by Wednesday." He emerged from the closet, a picture of silver fox perfection in his tailored suit, flashing that charismatic, asymmetrical smile that had made me fall in love with him when we were both 25 and surviving on cheap ramen. "What would I do without you, Chiara?" he asked, pressing a warm kiss to my temple. "Seriously, you keep my world spinning. You'd probably be wearing mismatched socks to your zoning meetings," I teased, adjusting his collar. The drive to JFK was unremarkable. We took the Van Wyck Expressway, listening to a jazz station on the radio, our hands casually linked over the center console. We talked about our upcoming anniversary trip to Tuscany, debating whether we should spend 3 days in Florence or head straight to the Amalfi Coast. Akira was engaged, attentive, and completely present. There was no nervous twitch, no checking of his watch, no subtle tell that would indicate the man holding my hand was a phantom. I pulled up to the Delta departures at Terminal 4, popping the trunk. The morning air was crisp, laced with the smell of aviation fuel and exhaust. "Call me when you land at O'Hare," I said, leaning over the console for a final kiss. "Always do," he promised, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that, looking back, makes my stomach churn with violent nausea. "I love you. I'll be home Friday." I watched him roll his Toomey suitcase through the sliding glass doors, a confident, handsome man who commanded the space around him. Once he was out of sight, I shifted the SUV into drive, intending to head straight to my architectural firm in Dumbo. But as I merged into the airport traffic, my favorite lip balm rolled off the center console and dropped into the dark abyss between the passenger seat and the door. At the first red light on the terminal exit road, I leaned over, jamming my hand blindly under the leather seat, feeling around the dusty floor mats. My fingers brushed against a discarded water bottle, a rogue French fry, and then something hard, rectangular, and encased in cheap plastic. Frowning, I pulled it out. It was a black, low-end Android smartphone. The screen was cracked in the top right corner. My first thought was completely innocent. Akira must have dropped a work phone. His firm often used prepaid devices for sensitive overseas negotiations or temporary project communications. But why would it be jammed so far under the seat, practically wedged into the metal tracking? And why wouldn't he have mentioned he was carrying a second device? Akira was an Apple loyalist. He sneered at anything that wasn't perfectly integrated into his iCloud ecosystem. I tossed it onto the passenger seat and continued driving, telling myself I would text him about it when he landed. But as I merged onto the Belt Parkway, a sharp, metallic chime echoed through the quiet cabin of the car. The burner phone lit up. I glanced over. The notification was glowing brightly on the lock screen. I didn't need to touch the phone to read it. The text was large and glaring against a generic blue background. "Rachel D. Noah misses his daddy already. Have a safe flight back to us. Love you." The steering wheel suddenly felt like it was made of ice. My lungs seized, trapping the air in my chest as a deafening ringing filled my ears. The cars around me blurred into streaks of metal and light. "Noah misses his daddy already." The words didn't compute. They were English, but they formed a sentence that belonged in an alien language. My hands began to shake so violently that I had to pull over onto the narrow shoulder of the highway, hazard lights flashing, the rush of morning traffic roaring past me like a hurricane. I stared at the plastic device as if it were a venomous snake coiled on the passenger seat. Daddy, us, love you. Akira didn't have a child. We had tried for years, enduring agonizing rounds of IVF, the heartbreak of 2 miscarriages, and the eventual, tearful acceptance that it just wasn't going to happen for us. We had grieved together. We had held each other on the bathroom floor. He had looked into my eyes and told me I was enough, that we were enough. I reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the phone. The screen had gone dark. I pressed the power button, bringing the notification back to life. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a wrong number. The contact was saved. Rachel D. Sitting in the vibrating SUV on the side of a Brooklyn highway, the 10-year foundation of my life quietly dissolved into dust. Survival instinct is a strange phenomenon. Instead of screaming, instead of breaking down into hysterical tears, a cold, clinical numbness washed over my brain. It was a bizarre detachment, as if I were floating above my own body, watching a stranger experience the worst moment of her life. I pulled back onto the highway and drove robotically until I found a desolate corner of a strip mall parking lot in Howard Beach. I put the car in park, killed the engine, and picked up the phone again. I swiped the screen. A pattern lock appeared, a grid of 9 dots. I didn't know Rachel D. I didn't know Noah. I didn't know the password to this alternate universe. But as I tilted the screen against the morning sunlight streaming through the windshield, I saw the undeniable, oily smudge of a thumb sliding across the glass. It started at the top left, dropped down to the middle, and hooked right in the shape of an L. Holding my breath, I traced the greasy ghost of my husband's fingerprint. The phone unlocked with a soft click. I was in. I bypassed the home screen, which featured a candid photo of a golden retriever I had never seen in my life, and tapped directly into the messaging app. The thread with Rachel D was at the top. I tapped it, and thousands of messages unfurled before my eyes, a digital scroll of my husband's betrayal. Akira, boarding now. I hate leaving you guys. Rachel, I know. Noah cried when you pulled out of the driveway. He wanted to show you his new Lego set. Hurry back on Thursday. Thursday? Akira was supposed to be in Chicago until Friday. He always came home Friday evening. My thumb scrolled upward, moving back in time. I read through mundane, domestic exchanges that felt like physical blows to the chest. Pick up the organic milk, not the regular. Did you call the plumber about the guest bathroom? Don't forget, we have dinner with my parents on Saturday. Saturday. The Saturday he told me he was locked in an all-day symposium at the McCormick Place Convention Center. I scrolled faster, a frantic, desperate rhythm, going back months, then years. The thread went on endlessly. There were photos embedded in the text. I clicked on an attachment from 3 months prior. The image expanded to fill the screen, and the air finally left my lungs in a ragged gasp. It was Akira. He was standing in a sprawling, sunlit kitchen with white shaker cabinets and a butcher block island. He was wearing his favorite vintage Rolling Stones t-shirt, the one I had bought him at a flea market in Brooklyn. He was smiling effortlessly, holding a little boy with a mop of curly brown hair and Akira's exact, unmistakable hazel eyes. The boy, who looked to be about 3 years old, was laughing, his small hands clutching Akira's cheeks. Standing next to them was a woman, Rachel. She was blonde, petite, and radiated a wholesome Midwestern beauty. She had her arm wrapped intimately around Akira's waist. They looked like a catalog ad for the perfect American family. A guttural sob finally tore its way out of my throat, raw and ugly. I dropped the phone onto the console and doubled over, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel, gasping for oxygen. The physical pain was excruciating, a hot, searing knife twisting in my ribs. My husband, my faithful, loving, supportive husband, who held my hand through the trauma of infertility, was raising a son with another woman in another state. After 10 minutes of blinding, paralyzing grief, the cold numbness returned, sharper this time. The architect in me, the woman trained to assess structural integrity and find the hidden faults in a foundation, took over. I picked up the phone again and backed out of the messages, opening the photo gallery. I needed to know everything. I needed the blueprints of this betrayal. There were hundreds of photos, neatly organized by location and date. Vacations to Aspen, apple picking in autumn, Christmases, I clicked on a photo dated December 22nd of the previous year. Akira in a Santa hat, assembling a tricycle. He had told me he was snowed in at an airport hotel in O'Hare that night, missing our annual holiday party. I had spent that evening making excuses for him to our friends, my heart aching because I knew how much he hated being away from me during the holidays. I looked at the metadata on the photos. Oak Park, Illinois, a picturesque suburb just outside of Chicago. I opened the email app on the burner phone. It was logged into a generic Gmail account, asullivanconsulting@gmail.com. The inbox was a treasure trove of financial and logistical evidence. There were mortgage statements from Chase Bank for a property in Oak Park. The mortgage was in his name and Rachel Dempsey's name. There were utility bills, pediatric dental invoices for Noah Dempsey Sullivan, and receipts for landscaping services. He wasn't just having an affair. An affair is a hotel room, a stolen weekend, a frantic clash of hidden desires. This was a parallel existence. He had manufactured a second life with the precision of a master clockmaker. For at least 4 years, judging by the age of the child, he had been splitting his time, his money, and his soul evenly down the middle. And the terrifying part was how perfectly he had pulled it off. He never mixed up our stories. He never called me by her name. He made love to me with the passion of a devoted husband, bought me thoughtful gifts, and remembered the names of all my obscure, distant relatives. He was a sociopath, disguised as the man of my dreams. I sat in the car for 2 hours, archiving every piece of data. I forwarded the most damning emails to a secure, encrypted email address I created on the spot using my own phone. I took photos of the burner phone's screen, capturing the text messages, the gallery, the contact list. I was building a dossier. By the time I finally turned the key in the ignition, the weeping, heartbroken wife who had pulled over on the highway was dead. In her place sat a woman composed entirely of ice and calculated fury. Akira Sullivan had spent years designing this intricate, deceitful labyrinth. Now, I was going to burn it to the ground with him inside it. The drive back to Park Slope felt like navigating a foreign country. The streets I had walked 1,000 times, the local cafes where Akira and I spent our Sunday mornings, the neighbors waving from their stoops, it was all a Hollywood set, a flimsy facade masking a horrifying reality. I unlocked the heavy oak door of our brownstone, stepping into the foyer. The house was immaculately silent. The morning light filtered through the stained glass transom window, casting colorful geometric shadows on the hardwood floor. It was the home we had renovated together, pouring our savings and our hearts into every tile, every fixture, every gallon of paint. Now, standing in the hallway, I felt like a trespasser in a stranger's house. I didn't bother taking off my coat. I walked straight up the floating staircase to the second floor, bypassing our master bedroom, and headed directly for Akira's home office. The room was a testament to his curated persona. Dark mahogany bookcases, leather armchairs, drafting tables, and framed architectural awards hung on the walls. It smelled of old paper and the expensive scotch he kept on the credenza. I locked the door behind me, dropped my purse, and went to work. If Akira was paying half a mortgage in Illinois, funding a child's life, and maintaining an upper-middle-class lifestyle for Rachel, the money had to be coming from somewhere. We kept our finances relatively merged, a joint checking account for household expenses, joint savings, and our individual investment portfolios. He made considerably more than I did, but I had always trusted him to manage the bulk of the overarching investments. I sat at his heavy mahogany desk and booted up his iMac. It was password protected, of course, but Akira was arrogant. He thought his physical security measures meant he didn't need complex digital ones. I typed in the name of his childhood dog, combined with his graduation year, Buster1999. Access granted. I opened his browser history, his document folders, his hidden files. Nothing immediately suspicious. He was too smart to keep the smoking gun in plain sight on a shared network. I turned my attention to the physical space. I opened every drawer, flipped through leather-bound ledgers, and checked behind the framed diplomas. Finally, my eyes landed on the bottom right drawer of his antique filing cabinet. It was the only one with a physical lock, an old brass keyhole. He had once casually mentioned he lost the key years ago and only kept old college syllabi in there anyway. I went down to the kitchen, grabbed a heavy-duty flathead screwdriver and a claw hammer from the utility closet, and marched back upstairs. I jammed the flathead into the brass lock and hit the back of the handle with the hammer. Once, twice. On the third strike, the brittle, antique metal gave way with a sharp crack. The lock cylinder splintered, and the drawer slid open smoothly on its tracks. Inside were neat, color-coded manila folders. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled them out, spreading them across the vast expanse of the desk. The first folder was labeled Lakeside Consulting, LLC. I opened it. It was the incorporation paperwork for a consulting firm registered in Delaware, listing Akira Sullivan as the sole proprietor. I opened the next folder. Bank statements from a regional bank I had never heard of, mailed to a P.O. box in Manhattan. I scanned the columns of numbers. My breath hitched. The deposits were staggering, substantial wire transfers coming in every month from his primary firm, labeled as independent contractor bonuses and consulting retainers. It was money that legally belonged to our marital assets, money he had siphoned off before his paycheck ever hit our joint Brooklyn account. And then there were the withdrawals. Chase Mortgage, $4,200. Bright Horizons Daycare, $1,800. Target, $340. Whole Foods Market, Oak Park, $210. He had stolen millions of dollars from our marriage over the last 5 years to fund his second life. The sheer scale of the financial deception was breathtaking. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had defrauded me. As I sat there, staring at a receipt for a toddler's winter coat, my own Apple iPhone began to vibrate aggressively on the desk. The caller ID flashed. Akira, hubby. I stared at the screen, watching the little white heart pulsate. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from sliding out of the leather chair. Every instinct screamed at me to answer the phone, scream into the receiver, confront him with the burner phone, demand to know why I wasn't enough, demand to know who Rachel was, but the cold, calculating architect inside me ruthlessly suppressed the hysterical wife. If I confronted him now, while he was in Chicago, he would have days to hide assets, destroy evidence, concoct lies, and manipulate the narrative. He would hire a shark lawyer before his return flight even touched the tarmac in New York. I needed to secure my financial future. I needed to document every single cent he had stolen. I needed to ambush him when he had absolutely nowhere to run. I took a deep, shuddering breath, smoothed my hair back, and swiped the green answer button. "Hey, honey," I said, my voice shockingly level, dipping into the warm, affectionate tone I had used with him for a decade. "Hey, beautiful." Akira's smooth, velvety voice came through the speaker. The background noise sounded like an airport terminal. Just landed at O'Hare. Taking a cab to the hotel now to drop off my bags before the first site visit. Liar. You're taking an Uber to Oak Park to kiss Rachel and hug Noah. Oh, good, I said, forcing a light chuckle. How's the weather? Is it freezing? Typical Windy City, he sighed, sounding genuinely exhausted. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I miss you already, Chloe. The house is so quiet without you bustling around. I squeezed my eyes shut, a single tear escaping and tracking hotly down my cheek. I miss you too, I managed to say, the lie burning like acid on my tongue. Hey, did you happen to lose a work phone? I found a weird black android under the passenger seat after I dropped you off. There was a pause on the line. A microsecond of dead air. The silence of a man whose heart had just skipped a beat. Oh, Akira said, his voice recovering its casual rhythm almost instantly. Yeah, actually. It's a burner one of the junior associates gave me for a project with that overseas client. It must have slid out of my briefcase. Thanks for finding it. Just toss it in my top desk drawer. I'll grab it on Friday. Will do, I said brightly, staring at the bank statements detailing his mortgage in Illinois. Have a great day, Akira. Knock 'em dead at the meetings. Love you, Chiara. Love you too. I hung up the phone and dropped it onto the desk. The psychological warfare had officially begun. He thought he was safe. He thought his foolish little wife had blindly accepted his excuse, ignorant of the devastation resting under her fingertips. I looked at the burner phone, then at the bank statements, and finally at the shattered lock of the filing cabinet. I had 3 days until Friday. 3 days to dismantle a decade of lies. 3 days to ensure that when Akira Sullivan walked through the front door of our brownstone, he would be walking directly into his own execution. I picked up my phone, dialed the number of the most ruthless divorce attorney in Manhattan, and prepared for war. Wednesday morning broke with a sickly, bruised hue over the Brooklyn skyline, a perfect meteorological mirror to the rot gnawing at the center of my chest. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. My veins were buzzing with a toxic cocktail of espresso, adrenaline, and a profound, agonizing grief that I had securely locked behind a mental vault. There would be time to cry later. Right now, I had to dismantle a sociopath. Victoria Hastings sat across from me in her expansive Midtown Manhattan corner office, her perfectly manicured fingers steepled over the pristine, color-coded copies of Akira's Delaware LLC paperwork. Victoria was a legendary matrimonial attorney whose reputation struck absolute terror into the hearts of cheating Wall Street executives. She was ruthless, cold, and exactly the weapon I needed. "The financial deception is staggering, Chiara," Victoria said, her voice a low, authoritative hum as she adjusted her tortoiseshell glasses. "I've had my forensic accountant, David, running these routing numbers all night. Akira hasn't just been siphoning off his bonuses. He forged your signature on a home equity line of credit against your Brooklyn brownstone 18 months ago. He pulled out $300,000 to use as a down payment for the Oak Park property with Rachel Dempsey." The words hit me like physical blows to the ribs, but I forced my posture to remain rigid, my spine pressed hard against the leather chair. He leveraged my home to buy a house for his mistress and his bastard son. "Legally speaking, yes," Victoria replied, pulling a fresh document from the stack. "But it goes deeper than that. David tracked the residual funds from Lakeside Consulting. Akira has been slowly moving marital assets into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He's preparing an exit strategy. Judging by the velocity of the transfers over the last 6 months, I estimate he was planning to initiate a divorce within the year, leaving you with the heavily mortgaged Brooklyn property while he absconded with the bulk of your liquid wealth to start a full-time life in Illinois." A cold sweat broke out along my hairline. Akira wasn't just living a double life, he was methodically orchestrating my financial ruin. He had smiled at me over dinner, kissed my forehead, and held me while I cried over our failed IVF treatments, all while plotting to discard me and strip me of everything I had worked for. "Freeze it all," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet vibrating with an absolute terrifying certainty. "I want the joint accounts frozen. I want the credit cards locked. File the injunctions quietly today so he isn't notified until he tries to swipe his black card. Can we do that?" "Consider it done," Victoria smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that made me grateful she was on my side. "By Friday afternoon, Akira Sullivan won't be able to buy a cup of coffee without my permission. But Chiara, we need more leverage for the settlement phase. We need to know exactly what he told this Rachel woman. Is she a willing participant, or is she another victim of his fraud?" That question haunted me for the entire Uber ride back to Park Slope. Once inside the silent, empty brownstone, I retrieved the cracked burner phone from the locked safe in my architectural studio downstairs. I needed to understand Rachel Dempsey. Sitting on the hardwood floor with my laptop open, I created a ghost account on Facebook and Instagram using a virtual private network. I searched for her name, narrowing the location down to Oak Park, Illinois. Within 10 minutes, I found her. Her profiles were entirely public, a monument to a happy, upper-middle-class Midwestern existence. There were photos of Noah's third birthday party, pictures of Akira manning a backyard grill, and long, overly earnest captions about how lucky she was to have found such a devoted partner. But as I scrolled deeper, bypassing the summer vacations and holiday parties, I noticed a recurring theme in the comments from her friends and extended family. "Akira is so strong for finding love again. You brought light back into his life after such a dark tragedy." My brow furrowed. Tragedy? I utilized the search function on her Facebook timeline, typing in Akira's name. I scrolled back 3.5 years, to the early days of their documented relationship. And then, I found it. A post written by Rachel, dated October 14th, accompanied by a photo of Akira looking somber, staring out over Lake Michigan. The caption read, "Today is a heavy day for my incredible husband. It marks the second anniversary of losing his first wife, Chiara, to an aggressive battle with breast cancer. Akira, watching you navigate the trauma of becoming a widower and still keeping your heart open enough to love me and our beautiful boy is the greatest privilege of my life. Chiara would be so proud of the man and father you are today. We are lighting a candle for her tonight. The oxygen vanished from the room. My vision tunneled, the edges of the laptop screen blurring into a chaotic swirl of static. He didn't just hide me, he killed me. To Rachel Dempsey, to her family, to his entire Midwestern world, I was a tragic memory, a dead woman, a ghost who lost her hair and her life to cancer, paving the way for Rachel to be the heroic second wife who rescued the broken widower. That was how he explained his frequent absences. In the beginning, he was traveling back to New York to settle my non-existent estate, to manage his grief, to handle the ghosts of his past. It was a masterstroke of sociopathic genius. By making me a beloved, deceased saint, he ensured Rachel would never harbor any jealousy or ask too many questions about his former life. She pitied me. She lit candles for me. A dark, hysterical laugh bubbled up from the depths of my throat, echoing loudly off the high ceilings of the brownstone. It was a terrifying sound, a sound devoid of any remaining sanity or mercy. Akira Sullivan had written a beautiful, tragic script for his life. It was time for the dead wife to rewrite the ending. Friday evening arrived with the creeping inevitability of an execution. I spent the afternoon meticulously preparing the stage. I wore my favorite crimson silk wrap dress, the one Akira always said made me look like an Italian movie star. I applied my makeup with surgical precision, ensuring my cheekbones looked sharp and my eyes betrayed absolutely nothing. I roasted a chicken with rosemary and lemon, filling the house with the intoxicating, domestic aroma of a devoted wife awaiting her husband's return. On the long, reclaimed oak dining table, I placed 3 items, spaced perfectly equidistant from one another. First, the black burner phone. Second, a thick manila folder containing the offshore bank statements, the home equity fraud documents, and Victoria Hastings' meticulously drafted divorce petition. Third, a printed full-color screenshot of Rachel's Facebook post mourning my tragic death from breast cancer. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and sat at the head of the table, waiting. At exactly 6:15 p.m., the heavy front door clicked. The familiar, rhythmic thud of his Toomey suitcase rolling across the foyer tiles sent a final, involuntary spike of adrenaline through my veins. "Chloe, I'm home!" Akira called out, his voice rich, warm, and entirely normal. I didn't answer. I just took a slow sip of my wine. A moment later, he walked into the dining room, loosening his navy silk tie. He stopped dead in his tracks. The smile on his handsome face faltered for a fraction of a second as he took in the scene me, sitting motionless at the head of the table, and the bizarre arrangement of items spread out before me. "Hey, beautiful," he said, recovering quickly, though his eyes darted nervously to the manila folder. "Everything okay? You look incredibly serious for a Friday night. And you look stunning, by the way." "Sit down, Akira," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a cold, metallic density that made him physically flinch. He swallowed hard, leaving his suitcase in the hallway, and slowly pulled out the chair opposite me. "Chiara, what's going on? Is this about the work phone you found? Because I told you." I unlocked it. I interrupted, my gaze locking onto his. "Your passcode is the same pattern you use to rub my back when I have a migraine. An L shape. Very predictable." The remaining color violently drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. His jaw slackened, and for the first time in a decade, the great Akira Sullivan was completely speechless. The charismatic armor evaporated, revealing the terrified, pathetic fraud hiding underneath. "I spent the last 3 days talking to Victoria Hastings and a very talented forensic accountant," I continued, my voice eerily calm. "I know about the home equity line of credit you fraudulently opened in my name. I know about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. I know about Lakeside Consulting. And most importantly, I reached out and tapped the printed screenshot with one manicured fingernail. I know that I died of breast cancer 5 years ago." Akira physically recoiled, pressing himself into the back of his chair. He looked as though I had just held a loaded gun to his forehead. "Chiara, please, let me explain. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I whispered, leaning forward. "You built a financial house of cards to fund a second family, and you killed me off to cover your tracks. It's actually brilliant, Akira. Truly. A masterpiece of psychological manipulation." "It meant nothing!" he suddenly cried out, his voice cracking with desperation. He lunged forward, pressing his hands flat against the table. Rachel means nothing. It was a mistake. A stupid, snowballing mistake. You are my wife. You are the only woman I have ever loved. I swear to you, I can fix this. I will end it. I'll cut them off. Just, please, Chiara, don't throw away 10 years. You already threw them away, I said quietly. I reached for the black burner phone. I unlocked it, swiped to the contacts, and tapped the FaceTime icon next to Rachel D's name. I turned the volume all the way up and placed the phone flat on the center of the table, facing the ceiling. Akira realized what I was doing a second too late. No, Chiara, stop! What are you doing? He screamed, lunging across the table to grab the device. I snatched the heavy glass bottle of Cabernet and slammed the bottom of it down onto his reaching knuckles. He yelped in pain, pulling his hand back just as the FaceTime call connected. Akira? Honey, is everything okay? Rachel's cheerful, Midwestern voice filled the dining room through the phone's tiny speaker. I thought you were in meetings until tonight. Akira was paralyzed. He looked from the phone to me, his eyes pleading, begging for a mercy he absolutely did not deserve. I picked up the phone and held it in front of my face. Rachel's smile instantly vanished. She was standing in the immaculate Oak Park kitchen, a toddler perched on her hip. She stared at the screen, her brow furrowed in deep confusion. Who? Who is this? Why do you have Akira's phone? Hello, Rachel, I said, offering her a polite, terrifyingly serene smile. My name is Chiara Sullivan. I'm Akira's wife, the one who tragically passed away from breast cancer. I watched in high definition as Rachel's reality collapsed. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers, her mouth opening in a silent gasp of absolute horror. She dropped the wooden spoon she was holding. It clattered loudly against the granite countertop. No, Rachel whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, that's not. Chiara is dead. Akira, who is this? Akira! I turned the camera so she could see Akira, sitting at the dining room table, his face buried in his hands, weeping like a broken child. He's right here, I told her, my voice turning to ice. He's been living here, in our home in Brooklyn, for the last 10 years. The mortgage you pay in Illinois? It's funded by money he stole from me. You are the other woman, Rachel. And I am very, very much alive. A visceral, agonizing wail erupted from the phone's speaker, the sound of Rachel's heart shattering into a million pieces. Noah began to cry in the background. I've emailed a copy of his Delaware LLC fraud and the offshore banking statements to your personal email address, I informed her, over the screaming. I highly suggest you find a lawyer immediately, because my attorney has already frozen all of his accounts. Your joint checking account is currently at 0. I ended the call. The silence that rushed back into the dining room was deafening, broken only by Akira's ragged, pathetic sobbing. You're ruined, Akira, I said, standing up from the table and smoothing down the skirt of my crimson dress. Your accounts are frozen. Your credit cards will decline. The locks on this house were changed this afternoon by a locksmith. The key you used to get in has already been disabled from the master system. My security team is waiting on the sidewalk to escort you off the premises. He looked up at me, his face streaked with tears, his hazel eyes wide with a horrific realization. He had nothing, no money, no secrets, no wife, no mistress. Get out of my house, I whispered. I watched the security guards drag him down the brownstone steps, his Toomey suitcase bouncing wildly behind him. I stood in the doorway, feeling the crisp evening air wash over my face. I wasn't just a survivor of his betrayal. I was the architect of his destruction, and my foundation was finally secure. Betrayal leaves a scar, but survival builds an empire. What would you do if you discovered your entire reality was a carefully constructed lie? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that women are not to be underestimated. Turn on notifications.